Beautiful. So anyways, so today I was thinking, what should I talk about? Like, because to be honest, we were a little bit thinking, okay, we don't have enough of talks, and I personally do a lot of things that are on the backend side and that are in Laravel or PHP or WordPress or basically anything that's server-side rendered, and where we don't necessarily need the whole front-end stack, so we don't need a whole Svelte Kit app or Next.js app. Of course, there are also some projects where I work where there's Svelte Kit or Next.js, but on many they're also not. So basically, like, I've been always thinking, like, no matter what kind of web app you use nowadays, at some point if you want to provide a good user experience, you need to have some kind of interaction. So not everything can be server-side rendered, and not every click should be like basically new page load. And basically the new standard, and it's not so new, it's just like I don't see it so used so much, didn't really take off, are web components. So I want to ask who have heard of web components at least. Perfect. I was hoping for this answer. Who have used web components in production? Okay, that's also great. Who has did anyone build a web component? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So what did you use to build web components?
I wanted to try them with that embed stuff I talked to you about.
Yeah.
So like the components have this nice property that the styles are scoped.
Yeah.
But there were like issues there, so we went with other scoping, like species techniques. And also I did more research how to like make web component without these new tag like Svelte or Svelte. I don't remember which one. So because it requires like put it in every component, and if you already have like components, and just to do this stuff quickly, have to get it everywhere.
I hear. Okay, so like, thanks for sharing. So basically, like, because this is also going to be online, pretty much just one or two people built web components. So basically, what I want to show, or like what I tried, why I came to this talk, is because I've heard at some points that someone in some maybe changelog or whatever mentioned, hey, we did a update in Svelte how to how to build better web components, or like they updated the API. I think in Svelte 4 they did a lot, like since they moved. I was like, okay, I remember there was this change, so I want to check how to do it. And then I went to the svelte.dev docs, and I started following I can actually show it. Why not? So if we go to svelte.dev and we go to docs, there is where is it? Custom elements API. So basically, there's an API that I'll zoom it in a little so you see. There is an API that tells you can, with a couple of configuration things, you can say Svelte options, custom element, give your element a name, and you're off to build custom components. But basically, I was like, okay, where should I put the custom elements through in the compiler? It just says put it in the compiler options. So I went there. I was like, yeah, I tried it on one place, doesn't work. On the other, it doesn't work. I couldn't figure it out. I'll get back to this. But basically, that was my motivation, that I could not easily figure it out from the docs. And I spent some time, so I want to share how I did it. But before I continue, first, let's talk about shortly who I am. So I'm Ermin. I've been doing web development for the last 15 years. I started with PHP 5.4, did a little bit of Rails, then Laravel, then WordPress, then went through the whole e-commerce frameworks and basically content management. So basically, I did a little bit of backend, a little bit of frontend, and then I tried React, built a couple of projects with React, and didn't like it so much. And then Svelte 3 came out, and I was like, this rings the bell. This is great. I love it. And then, I'm combining these two. So what are the web components? Basically, it's a web components as web components don't exist. There is no thing called web components. So basically, this is their web components is basically more of a 3 APIs combined together. One of them is custom elements API, second is shadow DOM, and the third is HTML templates. So basically, I'll open the custom element API on Mozilla just to show you a little bit how it works. So basically what the custom element API is basically a way to create your own HTML element. And same as if we would want to create JavaScript applications without any framework, it gets very complicated very fast. We don't have a state management. We don't have a template, like clear templates. And basically, we would need to attach shadow. We need to kind of inline the styles. We need, basically, we need to manually create elements. So there is not a clean way. So basically, this resulted in people figuring out, okay, let's make this a little cleaner. So there are frameworks or like libraries like Lit or Stencil, which kind of are helpers on top of these functions. And like also since some time, there's also, since Svelte is compiler, Svelte team figure out, oh, we could also generate web components, and people already know Svelte. So yeah, let's do that. Okay. So how to recognize web component is that basically web component or like element, custom elements have the dash in the name. So basically, if it's something dash something, that's a custom element. So if you inspect something, because all of the native elements do not have dashes, so that's and actually it's a requirement. If you want to create new one, you cannot create a custom element without dash. So basically, it's probably just they're making sure that in future, if they release a new element, it doesn't interfere with the standards. So why should we use web components? So like, what are actually the use cases? Because like we have already frameworks like React and Svelte and Vue, so for interactivity, and like then the question is, why would we reach for web component in which cases? So first things first, it's official web standard. There is even an article basically that's a little controversial that tells like, the web components are going to outlive all of the frameworks. And it's probably somewhat true because if it's in the browser, we've seen how slow are things to disappear from the browsers. It takes sometimes decades, just to remove them. So basically, if you build something on top of web components, it's likely going to last. There is already support for all of the major browsers, so you very seldomly, if ever, need to use polyfills anymore. So if you're not using Internet Explorer, you don't need any polyfills. You can, you can easily reuse them. So what means reuse them? Like you can reuse them in any framework. Like actually since recently also in React, because React didn't support web components out of the box up until 19, I think, version 19. But basically now if you have a web component, you can just include it in Svelte, in React, in Node.js. So like if you can just open index.html file, include, put the component, and it's going to work. Encapsulation, so basically web components have something, it's an option. I think it's on by default, but basically they have the shadow DOM, meaning that they behave kind of like an iframe, let's say. So where basically if you have styles and scripts, they're not gonna interfere with the rest of the page, meaning you can go crazy. And when you include it, it's just gonna be in this small box or whatever, like everything. And this can be desired outcome, but sometimes it can lead to limitations as well. So it's important to actually research or like think of what do you want to do. And if you need something that reacts with everything on the page, maybe it's not the best idea. Yeah, and interoperability. So basically, this is also similar to what I meant with reusability. Is basically that you can build web component in one place and then use it everywhere. Incremental adoption. So basically, if you're coming from I don't know, old school monolith backend app, and you need to introduce reactivity, like interactivity in certain parts, but not everywhere. It's very hard to rewrite the whole app. It's hard to convince even the management of the company to say, oh, let's just rebuild everything in Next. But you can do like one view by one view, or like one component by one component, by literally building one web component and just introducing it in one place, and then second in another place. And then if enough of these get built, maybe you can propose the next step of like combining them. And one more thing is the longevity. And what I mean by this is I'm in web development for long enough that I have still apps that are online that are like from 2009, from 2010, and usually the ones that are still online and still working and still generating revenue are the ones that are built in technologies that don't change often. So in contrast, I have apps like that are built in React in 2019 and 2020, and already if I run npm install on the new project, there's no chance I can. It's like, forget about it. It's like people will say, yeah, in theory it works, but like none of your dependencies work. You have to upgrade everything, so it's a major job. So basically, what I mean by longevity is that since you're not, so if you use web components in the older system, you're not dependent on the latest version of npm. You can still run your old system, and web component is going to work because of the official web standards. So the next thing is why not to use web components. Okay. So first, maybe not obvious, maybe obvious, is there is no server-side rendering. So like or at least as of today, there are some tries, there are some workarounds, but there's no official server-side rendering for web components, meaning that if you, like, for me, server-side rendering is often important for e-commerce projects where I need good search engine optimization support. And if, like I've researched a little, and certain people say that it doesn't influence search engine optimization results, but whom to trust, I don't know. The second one is the accessibility challenges. So basically, it's not as straightforward to build, especially the right. So basically, the right encapsulation of like focus and things. So basically, it's quite hard to move them from shadow DOM to outside and the other way around. So this could be a little hard. So the next one that we take for granted in all of the other frameworks is cross-component state management. So since basically web components work pretty much as other HTML components, they're on their own unless you introduce some third-party state management library. So comparatively worse developer experience. But when I say comparatively, I compare it with all the frameworks we like Svelte. Okay, again, I missed this. So basically, we're gonna, the reason why we have this talk is, or why I have this talk is like to show that maybe at least the last point is something we can change by using Svelte to do it. So the next question is how to actually build a web component using Svelte. And as I've shown already, like there is a page on Svelte website that shows how to do it, but it was not completely clear for me because I feel like it's outdated, and maybe I'll try to open a PR or something. But in the meantime, I just want to show, I also seen like on a couple of threads on Reddit and on Discord, there are questions of, hey, it doesn't work. Where do I put this? Where do I put that? So basically, in order to build Svelte web components using Svelte, it's easier to start a Svelte project and not Svelte kit project. So basically, the thing is, if we go to the website of svelte.dev and see getting started, basically npm create Svelte at latest will generate Svelte kit app. And this isn't, of course, we can still set up generating the web components, but it's way harder. So basically, what I found easier is doing pnpm create beat Svelte web, like this is the project name, because this will generate just simple Svelte project. So not Svelte kit, but just Svelte project. And this is something that I really used to like about the Svelte, that you can just start this Svelte project and not Svelte kit, not the whole thing with the adapters. But yeah, maybe it will get easier after a while.
If you go to docs, at one of the first pages, like getting started or something on introduction, they mention this one, and then they mention the wheat one. Okay, if you want, like there is Svelte uses.
Yeah, here, perfect. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so it's like they call it the alternative, but
yes.
I think it should be like the primary.
Yes, because I mean I get it. So like SvelteKit will help you with routing and everything, but for Svelte for web components we don't need this. So after that we need to configure svelte.config.js by adding compiler options, adding custom elements through to compiler options. Oops. And then the last thing is we need to add few. So we don't have to add this in theory, but I find it easier, and I'll show you why. It's basically defining where do we want it, how do we want it, switching it to be immediately invoked functions. So yeah, I'll just show you quickly an example of how the project is generated, like how this is the wrong thing. So basically the Vite config, I'll show you just one more cool thing, but basically in the Svelte config, we literally just added compiler options custom element true. And in Vite config, we added to the build config name. So entry is where we import all of our Svelte components, and then the Vite will automatically move them to web components. What's the file name? And this is Svelte web components short, and formats. It's immediately it's like IFE anyway. Yeah.
Immediately invoke function execution.
Yes.
I think it's function expression.
Anyway, so basically there's one more thing that I added that you do not have to include, but I find it quite easier. So basically, in order not to build every time this particular file manually by running pnpm run build, there is a fun plugin built by Shaniv here in audience. It's called Watch and Run. It's basically a Vite plugin that does exactly what it tells. It's watching certain files, and then when they do, in this case, add, change, or unlink, it will run a function. So basically, this way, when you run npm run dev, it's just going to build it every time you change the component. So basically, that's that. And then in main.js that we pointed in Vite config, or TS, whatever someone prefers, we just import the components. So for example, there is a component called split. I'll show in a second what it is. That at the top has Svelte options, custom element, and then name of the element. And the thing is, maybe in some cases you want to use, because when you do this, this is only web component, but maybe in some cases you want to have this both as Svelte component and web component. So maybe you have a Svelte application you want to use. In this case, you can, instead of here, there is in the docs, let me see. Yeah, here. So basically, you can define the same thing basically in the file where you're building. So you would do it like this. So remember, you have to have some prefix and line. So let's do split, and then you will do split.element. So basically, when you have this, then you don't have to have the top line, in case someone needs it. Yes, so what the split does, I'll just show you quickly. The split actually splits two parts of the app, and I use this in the presentation. That's PHP app. So this is kind of crossover. So basically, this presentation you're looking is server-side rendered PHP app. It's just index.php. Not much, and I used web components to make it a little interactive. So like basically everything that you've seen, for example, this is kind of fetched, and see, like I'm at the moment using my keyboard to show these things, and this is all done with the web components, and I'll show you shortly how. So basically, this is my PHP app. I have one-line router that works. I built it today. So this is just a list of everything. And so I did this just to show that, if you're working in a bigger team where you have hardcore backend guys or girls, who are building these old school apps, that you can use that web components to actually make things a little bit interactive. So for example, the part that I built here, like this divider, it's often you kind of need, in the application, you have a navigation on the left side and the content on the right, and it would be nice if you can just kind of make it smaller or bigger, kind of like in VS Code or whatever. So I just decided to build a component. To be honest, I asked ChatGPT to build it, and it worked perfectly. So I'll show you anyway. So like how it's included in the code, there is just, it's called Svelte Web Component Split. If we go back here, there's a split exported as Svelte Web Component Split. So basically, what does this have? It's horizontal. It has, so it exports the variable or like prop direction, split ID, and then these are internal things. So what it does is basically, when I click and pull, it just changes the CSS style, and sets this, for example, for 150 pixels, and this for 100 or for 600 pixels or whatever. And what I also figured out, what would be cool is like, what if I refresh? It stays where you had it to begin with. So that's kind of a fun part. It's for the users anyway. So what's the cool part is, sorry, I'm jumping from one to another. So basically, how we add the left part and the right part is using slots. So very conveniently in Web Components and Svelte, they're both called slots, and it's exactly the same thing. So it's kind of good convention. So basically, we can say, we can just add to a div prop that's called slot and put a name. So we can use name slots, and the same like for both of them. We can pass the props, and that's pretty much it. Another part that I add is Svelte Web Components Enhance. This is also something that ChatGPT built. And basically what does this do is, it encapsulates the whole app, and basically it listens for certain events that are being clicked. So for example, if I click arrow up, it will check whichever link I had at the moment selected. It will go to the previous one and send a fetch request, and then when it comes back, it will basically populate. So it kind of acts like a little client-side router. I built this in 10 minutes using ChatGPT, and it works quite good. And if I go down, it's basically first gonna check if I have any hidden elements, show them, and when I show all of them, so this is all happening, I'm clicking the arrow down. When it shows the last one, it will load the next page. So basically, this is something that is, all of this is done by Web Component. And basically, if I would be a front-end developer and maybe there is not too much of flexibility in the old backend system, I could build this functionality and I wouldn't need a backend developer to change much. The cool part of this is, so basically, like, see, this is where we built our Vite Svelte Web Component file. So if I delete this, everything's going to work. There is not going to be interactivity. There is not this divider or whatever, but the app still works. It's still clickable. It's not interactive. But the thing is, the cool part about Web Components is, since they are default web standard, the slots basically, even if, so like what, I can wrap this into anything and it will just kind of ignore. If there is no functionality defined in JavaScript into this, it will just treat it as a div basically. It will just say, okay, no problem, I don't need JavaScript. I'm just gonna do my job. So I'll just put this back, refresh, it comes back. So that's that. We've shown how. So basically, I told before that I did not use Svelte built web components in production, but I used other web components in production, like a lot actually. And for example, there is one that's I know not so well known in non-e-commerce or non-3D space, but there's a component called Model Viewer, and it wraps the whole 3JS and a lot more into web components. So you can super easily just load your 3D model and show it on the page. And it's not only that, I'll just go to examples. It has also, like, for example, animations, and it has AR, VR. So basically, this is all just wrapped into web component. And why I'm sharing this, it's more because, you know, web components are not built only for a stylized button with extra event, but you can actually build a proper thing, like, I don't know, very performant things that, you know, so like whatever you can do in the other things you can do. And see, this is a web component. It's just called model viewer. Allow camera controls. What do you want to allow? Where is your model? Where is your environment? And it loads it. So another place where you can look into web components is webcomponents.org, and this is more of a kind of like npm for web components. I mean, not really. It's more of a directory, but basically you can see what are the popular ones, what are the featured ones. For example, there are many from Adobe, you know, because they're using them in their Spectrum design system. So the cool part is you can just, you know, import it in any project. You don't have to even have a build system set up. So you can just load it, or you can go to their website and see how to use them. Yeah. So what else? And yeah, the one of the big ones is Shoelace. I don't know. It's kind of funny. Fun fact. I don't know if someone have heard of Shoelace, but basically there's one guy, the guy who built it. He wanted to kind of make a twist on the bootstrap, you know, reference bootstrap, Shoelace, you know. So, but better, you know. So he figured he'll build web components library, so not just like Boost, but that was a long time ago. But it grew into very nice library. And why I'm sharing this is because they also have something very interesting, experimental. Let me see. And this is something that I've been worried a lot about. Where is it? They have autoloader. So basically what means autoloader is, like, for example, at the moment in Svelte, what we've shown is that, you know, when you generate web components, it will just merge everything into one huge file. And of course, the more things you have, and see, there's also CSS, and, you know, it kind of adds up. So basically, there's no code splitting. You would have to export component by component, and then in your other file, you would probably have to import them like component by component. But basically, their Shoelace is doing it. I've seen more people doing it, that they're autoloaders, where basically you just load one script and it detects which custom web components are used on the page, and which will load styles and assets just for these particular ones. So yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question, because you said you are building with Laravel a lot of things, and I was curious, how far can you go with web components, for example, by dual binding data? Is this possible, and is it also possible to export the web components in different frameworks, and will they behave as the same, or how would it look like? Because I was thinking about web components already a lot, because I think I have to build a really big library for Laravel Angular, and I don't want to do double two things, two libraries with Laravel and Angular, and web components could be really nice. And you showed an example with by building with Svelte, and how you would pair it with Stencil and Lit, for example.
So Stencil and Lit are great, but I think they're more lightweight examples, because with Svelte, first advantage is, like, if you already know Svelte, it's not it's much easier. But the second is you have built-in state management, for example. You have built-in animations. You have everything that's already built into Svelte, you can use it in web components, because Lit and Stencil are basically just helpers on like they're tiny libraries, like 3 kilobytes or something, right? That are just like simplifying how you generate in the first place. So like I think this is a big advantage of Svelte. So the second question was two-way binding, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, there you cannot do. So this is something that I mentioned, I think, in Why Not, and this is where was it? Cross-component state management. Yes. So the issue is that it basically behaves pretty much the same as the regular HTML element. So what does this mean? It means that one-way binding is great. So like basically it's gonna be reactive whenever you change the content of the tag, so if you change the value, it will update, so this works fine. But if you want to do it the other way around, you have to do some kind of events. So you have to do event listening. Yeah, which I'm sure there are helpers and ways to do it easier.
Custom elements.
Yeah.
Custom events.
Yeah, exactly.
With the normal dispatch, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
What was there another question?
That was it actually.
I have the same thing. That's why I actually started, because I also have places where I need to do it on two, like the same components on two spots, and that's why I started digging into it. Yeah.
You've mentioned the slots, like the syntax for slots is the same for web components and for in the Svelte, and like in the introduction announcement video which made for Svelte type, he said like everything web components is wrong. Do the exact opposite. This is why there's syntax now and not slots.
So the thing is, like in Svelte itself, I do not enjoy slots. I prefer snippets. So I didn't start using Svelte 5 in production yet. I think we had this conversation before, but I like I always found slots a little bit like they're out of place in Svelte. Because I've worked with another template in engines that solved this in much nicer way. And I find that snippets solve it better. But in web components, this is very convenient because web components themselves call this functionality slots. Yeah. So like it's kind of easy to mentally connect them. Yeah.
And the second thing, like I was always wondering, like, the web components have a lot of trade-offs, negatives, but I think they're really useful for stuff that you do internally in the company, like some dashboard or stuff. You don't need accessibility as much. You don't need SSR. So like there's not as many libraries, web components, local libraries that you can like use for React, or Angular, or like so it's perfect. I really like it. I don't know if we found before, but not to mention that there will be more of that because apps in the enterprise want to rewrite React to develop whatever. Just go ahead.
So I was having the same question, but now if you go and check Microsoft, Adobe, and like pretty much any enterprise, they're all having web components as well. So I think it's slowly changing and teams are realizing this. I mean, obviously I already mentioned why not, and we have this screen here. So there are limitations. And of course, if you need server-side rendering, you have an issue, and this for a lot of people can be a big limitation. So if you're having a customer-facing portal or a website, and you want a unified design system that's built out in something, this is a big blocker, like if you cannot server-side render it, you cannot have like a website or a web store or product page or whatever, so I would assume this is maybe one of the reasons. But like internally for tools, people are moving towards it. I think it was also the lack of the browser support for a long time, because if some of the browsers don't support, because I think there was also kind of a little issue that initially the web components were for APIs, and then Firefox stopped supporting HTML includes, and then the others were like, okay, we don't know how stable this is, so like everyone will kind of put their hands a little back. They're like, let's revisit it later, and I feel like people are revisiting it now, basically. Yeah.
And probably also the authoring experience.
Yes.
You also mentioned that. It's
Exactly. So there was no tooling around it really. So I think Angular first became popular, then React, then Vue, and people kind of overlooked it. And overall, I feel like the bare metal web tooling or like APIs are quite complex. And as I've shown in one of the earlier slides, basically creating web component using just JavaScript is quite hard, and that's why nobody does it really. So yeah, I think it took time until tools got built.
It might be confused, but I don't understand why or how is it possible that once you refresh the page, the slider becomes like same position as before. Like where is the state preserved during the refresh?
It's preserved in the yes, it's in local storage. Here it is.
Local storage.
Yes, it just saves it here. Yes, and then it loads it from the local storage if it exists, and if it doesn't,
It goes somewhere there.
It's too small, or I cannot zoom in. Can I zoom in?
No,
You want to see it in the code? Yeah, let me see.
Oh,
Yes.
I was probably sleeping during that.
No, I didn't show the code. The thing is, like, I didn't. So the thing is, this is I don't know, 123 lines of code, and I generated this with like 7 ChatGPT interactions, and it worked great. So yeah. Yes.
So what about Svelte 5? Are there any changes to the code? Or
I don't know. So
I might be thinking like it doesn't matter because at the end it builds the EFI, so therefore
I would assume so. Yes, but I don't know. So basically, there is the Svelte 5. I think the thing is, even in Svelte 4, there is no focus on web components. So there is one caveat. I spoke with Jean-Yves as we were coming here. I spent an hour because I made all the presentation and all of this like today. So I spent it. So the most time I spent, I couldn't get slots to render. So like basically, no matter what I did, if I put things inside the slots, they just would not render.
There was a long-standing bug that was slots are still working up to the version 4.0, and after 1.0 until like all year, slots were very broken. So I did multiple applications that had to fit on the exact 4.0 just because of.
So basically, what I read, I also read through 20 issues today. And basically, the issue is, see, like I refresh this, there is nothing. It's gone. It's so basically, exactly. And they're like, oh yeah, everything works with scripts up, but slots. You have to put scripts under everything so the slots start working. Anyway, I'm glad that you asked because I wanted to mention this.
Like slot renders everything, then you see nothing because of this.
Yes. But if you put the scripts at the end, then you'll see your slots even in the later versions.
Later versions, it got fixed like 3.
It didn't. It's not fixed. I have the latest version.
My slot issue got fixed.
Perfect.
It works on my computer.
Yes. Cool. Okay. Thank you all for listening.
Also renders the blade files on the server, and you said that there are some issues with web components with server-side rendering. How does it behave with blade files?
What do you mean? What's the question exactly? So blade will get rendered.
They will get rendered. Okay.
Yeah. So blade is server-side rendered anyway. And so just think of web components as regular HTML elements. Like imagine select.
Okay. Now I get it. Now I understand what you had on the.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sure.
So there's some kind of experimental SSR format?
There are ideas and concepts and proofs of concepts, but nothing really. I mean, I think it's the same as with HTML elements, So I mean, HTML elements work without JavaScript, which is great, but web components don't work without JavaScript, which is not great. So,
Yeah.
But cool thing that I've shown, I don't know, should I click Studio or Western? So the cool thing is that if you use slots, it will just render, it will just, if there's no JavaScript or there's some issue, it will just treat it as a div. So basically you can build some kind of fallback, which is fine. Cool.